Hello everyone, welcome back to Max Easy Lessons. Today we are going to look at A Stone's Throw, Elma Mitchell. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. There will be much more content from poetry, short stories, questions and answers. You would have already seen that there are notes on The Tempest, to Tijan, to yes, just about everything. Stay with me here, people. We are doing poetry today. If you are returning to the channel, guess what? Thank you for staying by and thank you for staying here. And I do hope you continue to learn something new. Let's get right into it. And this is a reading of the poem and a line by line analysis too. We shouted out, "We've got her. Here she is. It's her all right. We caught her. There she was. A decent-looking woman, you have said. They often are. Beautiful but dead scared. Tousled, we roughed her up a little. Nothing more, and not the first time by any means she had felt men's hands greedy over her body. But ours were virtuous, of course. And if her fingers bruised her shuddering skin, these were love bites, compared to the hail of kisses of stone, the last assault and battery, frigid rape to come of right. For justice must be done, especially when it tastes so good. And then this guru, preacher, God merchant, God knows what spoiled the whole thing. Speaking to her, should never speak to them. Squatting on the ground, her level, writing in the dust, something we couldn't read, and saw in her something we couldn't see, at least until he turned his eyes on us. Her eyes on us, our eyes upon ourselves. We walked away, still holding stones that we may throw another day given the urge. This poem can also be found in A World of Prose, which is edited by Mark McWatt and Hazel Simmons MacDonald and published by Pearson's Education Limited in 2005. Now before we look at the line-by-line analysis of the poem, you must be aware of the excerpt in the Bible, or the section in the Bible from which this poem is perhaps told. It's John 8, verse 3 to 11, and it goes, "And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in their midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and saith unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said to him, No man, Lord. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Now the poem itself is a dramatic monologue, where the speaker recounts the incident. Presumably he's telling this to a friend who he believes he must impress with his virtue. But there is also his manly aggressiveness and his unrepentant nature that comes out clearly in the poem. It is in free verse. The poem itself is written in free verse with modern language. Now here, with the use of modern language, it is so easy to see the themes in the poem, those of the conscience, tolerance, justice, and forgiveness. And these are all applied equally today. Now the poem is divided in itself into 7 sections. The first 5, they actually are presented to give a harsh account of the gang seizing the woman as their victim, and they are so happy in preparing to deal out the harsh legal punishment for her. But then in the 6th section, the tables are turned. These sections are longer, and in the brief final section, the accuser tries to save face. Now let's do this line by line, and let's start first with the title, A Stone's Throw. The term itself usually means that something is a short distance away. Now we are probably thinking that the people in this event, they were not far from the woman in another sense. And of course, the poem signifies the throwing that stone to condemn someone else. Now that's all about the title, A Stone's Throw. And if you do read the poem, you will realize that the title in itself is quite applicable. So can we do this line for line, people? All right, let's go. We, the first use of we in we've shouted out. The persona is one of the hostile group. And there is the implication that this hostile group consists of the Pharisees and the scribes. Now, he says they often are in line 7. Now, the persona is referring to the woman, the adulteress, and it seems as though she is a regular offender. In fact, some people will say that she is a prostitute. Now, both prostitutes and adulteresses were to be stoned to death according to the laws of that time and of that culture. In lines 9 to 10, tousled, we roughed her up a little bit. Nothing much. Her hair was already roughed up when they found her. For whatever reasons, her hair was roughed up, and so they continued to rough her up a little bit more. In lines 15 to 16, but ours were virtuous, of course, the persona is proclaiming to anybody who would listen that the hands of the scribes and the Pharisees, which were all over her body, yes, which were there to harm her, were actually righteous, because they believed that they were arresting, that they were taking control of a situation that involved a sinner. But the added use of course, it suggests that the persona is attempting to defend the actions that they had carried out. Because in truth, if you remember anything on the scribes and the Pharisees, these groups were often criticized because they were hypocritical in many ways and they were so self-righteous. Now in lines 17 to 19, to 24, what am I doing? In lines 17 to 24, and if, it starts with and if, or fingers bruised her shuddering skin, these were love bites compared to the hail of kisses of stone, the last assault and battery, frigid rape to come of right. Now all of this here, all of this is where the persona points out that the bruises that came by their action, that came of their action, these bruises were like marks of kisses given in the heat of love. Now what we people would call in modern day hickeys, right? Now this he compares to the cold barrage of stones that were the final violent attack. The persona appears to be cold-hearted and speaks to the frigid rape, which is a cold-hearted rape, but this would come to her as a just punishment because she was either a prostitute or an adulteress. Specifically, when going all the way down to it tastes so good in lines 26 to 27, here the persona's hypocrisy is clear. There is no doubt that he's a hypocrite. He anticipates, he is waiting for the sensual pleasure from stoning the woman for the sake of justice. Now, when we look at that line, we're thinking, is the persona any better than the woman herself? In line 28, the guru, a guru is an unconventional spiritual leader. Now, when I read from John 8 and 3 to 11, we realize that that biblical allusion, that story was actually in reference to Jesus. So the use of the guru here would perhaps indicate that the guru was Jesus himself. In lines 29, God knows what? He's running out of scornful labels for Jesus. The persona, ironically, uses a term which usually means something impossible to know. And when somebody says only God knows what, it simply means that, all right, I have no more justification for what I'm saying here, but only God alone can figure it out, because God is that ultimate being who could figure out everything. But the Bible tells us that God literally does know what Jesus is. In line 32, should never speak to them. As in line 7 above, the persona regards them, the others, with much scorn and ridicule, yes. So we go on to line 34 to 35. Writing. And this was where the guru was writing on the ground, writing in the dust, something we could not read. The biblical account here suggests that Jesus actually wrote on the ground as a way of ignoring the group. And at the same time, while he wanted to ignore them, he also wanted to see their reaction. His surprising actions, that include speaking, squatting, and writing, would have caught the group off balance. And this made them uncomfortable, because here is this guru who is here, and here are these people doing uncalled for things, unjust things to the woman, and yet still the guru is not commenting. He is there writing, perhaps as if ignoring them, and so the group becomes uncomfortable, and now they are even less sure of what they are actually doing. In lines 36 to 41, and saw in her something we couldn't see, at least until he turned his eyes on us, her eyes on us, our eyes upon ourselves. Here it is clear that Jesus, or the guru, sees in the woman something that the group cannot understand. And until he and the woman look at them, then they are obliged to look at themselves. In lines 42 to 46, we walked away, still holding stones that we may throw another day given the urge. The accusers leave, but like a bully that has been shamed, the persona tries to salvage some pride by insisting that he has not changed. He tries to make light of the situation, but he is totally embarrassed here. He is totally feeling guilty, but at the same time, he wants us to understand that another day and another time, if he feels the need to cast assertions on someone, he is going to do this. All right, let's go into the overview of the poem. It's an allegorical poem, and a dramatic monologue. A group of virtual men caught a woman and roughed her up. They want to stone her for a perceived wrong. However, the preacher, God merchant, speaks to her and squats on the ground and writes in the dust. Eventually, the men walk away with the hope that they will be able to do this on another occasion. There is the use of free verse to see the themes of justice, conscience, tolerance, and forgiveness. It is not hard to understand this poem, really and truly, because if we think of it as a dramatic monologue, the speaker is telling the story to someone else, right? And he's trying to impress this person. He's trying to allow the person to believe that he is righteous, he is holy, he is a virtuous individual. And so throughout the poem, we see that justice is meted out on both sides, the ones who are perhaps wrongfully accusing the woman, and then on the side of the guru, who sees forgiveness in her, who is able to tolerate her, unlike the scribes and the Pharisees, who have little or no tolerance for such a woman. The conscience, of course, there is an issue with their conscience, as eventually they learn to see, they learn to walk away, not necessarily to act in accordance with what is presented in front of them, but to walk away. The subjects in the poem are that of human cruelty, power and powerlessness of the woman, yes, and appearance, the power of the men against the power of the powerlessness of the woman. And then there is appearance versus reality. Now the techniques. Litotes are the first ones, or is the first one. The poem says, and not the first time. It means that the woman has felt men's hands on her body on several occasions before the incident in the poem actually takes place. There is the use of contrast. She'd felt men's hands greedy over her body, but ours were virtuous. There is a contrast between the greedy hands of the men and the goodness of these other men. Now let's go with irony. One would think that the men with the virtuous hands would have only pure thoughts. But not these men in the poem. They intend to stone a woman against a man is completely, utterly defenseless. Not to mention a woman against a group of men who are really trying to get back at her. And so, of course, she is completely defenseless against such people. There is also irony in the images of the cruelty being used. There is the bruised, there is the kisses of stone, there is assault, battery, and frigid rape. And the final in the techniques is the understatement. An example of this takes place in the lines, we roughed her up a little, nothing much. This makes it seem as though the men holding the stones are simply playing with the woman, when in fact they want to stone her to death. The poetic devices used in the poem. First up is the choice of speaker. The Bible story is told by someone who actually witnesses the events, but Mitchell changes this up a lot. And it is very interesting because she presents the persona as one of the Pharisees. This is the speaker, one who is actually a part of what is going on. The effect is perhaps one of the best, yes, because by giving the Pharisees the voice to speak in this poem, Elmer Mitchell manages to expose the lust, the sadism, the hypocrisy, and in fact, it is his own words that condemns him. The speaker also shows that he has no regard for the position that Jesus has taken, the one where Jesus shows that there is mercy and forgiveness regardless of the sin. And of course, the Pharisees in this case is nowhere repentant about his blatant sinfulness. He is very scornful of the way that Jesus squats down on the ground to be at the woman's level. And of course, he is unaware that he is revealing his own arrogance in this way by saying that should never speak to them. Who is the speaker then to determine who speaks to a woman who has sinned or who has not sinned? And so we see the arrogance coming out quite clearly. And we understand that in many ways, the speaker is a hypocrite. Second up is diction. The speaker uses words like virtuous and justice. But if you're stoning a woman, are you really virtuous? And do you really administer justice? To harm another person, to inflict harm on another person, irrespective of the situation, the Bible teaches against harming each other. And so when the Pharisees, who believes that he is as holy as can be, begins to take part and begins to enjoy the moment of stoning a woman, then we understand that through his language, the use of love bites, the hands greedy over her body, the kisses, the rape, which tastes so good, these are actually associated with a sexual encounter. The diction also includes words and phrases that are associated with violence. Now, how does a righteous man promote the idea of violence? He says, we roughed her up, bruised, assault, and battery, kisses of stone. What does this suggest about the Pharisee? He is just as violent as the woman. He's a hypocrite because he stands to uphold justice and law and rule and everything that his group stands for. But at the same time, he is creating more harm to a woman. Now, when we go to repetition, notice that it is very effective where the word eyes are repeated. Jesus looks at the men and sees past their religious clothing to the lust and hypocrisy that they hold inside. Similarly, it's the woman who now sees past the religious exterior as well. And finally, because Jesus has seen through them, the woman has seen through them, what we see is that the men have finally begun to see themselves for who they really are. It is they who are now on trial, not the woman. The use of the three there, the eyes on Jesus' eyes on the men, the woman's eyes on hers on the men, and the men's eyes on themselves, that is important, not just for repetition purposes, but then it holds to the Trinity. God the Father, the Son, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Three eyes staring at the injustice that is meted out in the society. The tone in the poem is one that is quite carefree. The Pharisee is carefree. He's also insulting in the way he speaks about the guru, the preacher, the God merchant, God knows what. He implies that Jesus has degraded himself just by talking to the woman. His carefree tone or his flippant tone continues to the end when he points out that they may bring another woman to be stoned another day if they are given the urge. Take note that the tone of the poem is not the same as the tone of the Pharisees. Instead, the tone of the poem itself is one of disgust for the self-righteous Pharisees. There is admiration for Jesus, and then there is the compassion for the righteous woman. And finally, let's look at the message in the poem. In some cultures, it is okay to stone women to death. But it also speaks to the self-righteousness that often make us blind to the personal feelings and the fact our personal feelings, we don't see our flaws, but we are quick to judge others based on what they have done. And then there is also the cruel intolerance because others have failed. We tend to judge individuals based on their actions. We do not see that we are not as righteous because in judging others, we are not righteous. And so the poem, Elmer Mitchell brings this across. It's the legal fanaticism, right, that some people hold, that they are so holy that they are able to judge others. But is this right? Is this right, and is this supposed to be? Elmer Mitchell does not agree that the self-righteousness was justified because she brings in Jesus. She brings in the guru, the preacher man, the God who knows what. She brings this person in to show to everyone that it is not okay to judge others based on their personal feelings. It is not okay to be cruel to others when they have failed. But instead, there is forgiveness in every negative thing that happens. Thank you so much again, people, for stopping here. I hope this also helped you. Stay tuned. Yes, there is more to come. Don't go too far. There are more uploads coming along pretty soon.